All right, let's go ahead and get started with writing. For those of you who have not seen the earlier streams, basically I am working on the third book in my Shadow Decade series, Open Proxy. You can see I've got the title page up here in Scrivener. We're still in the pre-writing phase. I do a lot of pre-writing. I find it helps me go much faster when I get to the writing itself. An author friend of mine, a podcaster, Paul Sading, has been talking about how helpful Dragon text-to-speech software, dictation software, has been in getting his word count up. And I'd love to try it. You know, it's been on my list for years, but I don't have the money. It's expensive. It's like $90, I think. So I'll add that to my Amazon wish list as one of the things to purchase when I can get around to it. Let's go ahead and start my timer up there in the corner. If you're not familiar with it, I use the Pomodoro timer there to just sort of keep track of, you know, my time during these streams, to make sure I take adequate breaks, because I tend to get carried away with it, you know, and this is a time management thing I use all day while working, and it's been helpful. Another thing that I started to do, let me grab this. Another productivity tool that I've started to make use of is the bullet journal, which is pretty useful. It's analog, but it's just sort of a way to manage my time and my projects. I've got it, picked it up right here. It's just a simple hardbound journal. This one was pretty cheap. I don't remember the brand, but I use it to manage my my month here. As you can see, I've got a schedule there. It's got some charts on it. It looks pretty fancy. And I also use it to organize my writing projects and other projects as well. I don't know if you can get a good look at that, but that's basically what I'm doing for Open Proxy. It's got all of the steps it takes to get me through pre-writing and writing to done, basically. So I'm keeping this, I'm recording what I'm doing, and it activates a different part of the brain than, you know, just writing stuff down here in Scrivener, which is still what I use for the notes, but for the actual tracking of the project, I've found it to be helpful. So, yeah. What else? I'm posting more to my YouTube channel, if you follow that. I've been doing a little bit more vlogging, and I've also been doing a Let's Play series of the 1980s RPG Wasteland. So if you're into retro gaming, I've been posting that there more so than on Twitch. Maybe I'll do that on Twitch. I mean, it's originally for gaming anyway, right? But I like to be able to, you know, do some post-processing and make it a little fancier, which is a little harder to do on the fly with the streams, but, you know, we'll see what happens. You know, I don't go for too long in a single sprint anyway. I've got a lot of different projects, and I don't really work on any of them for more than an hour or two at a time, and it seems to be the dominant paradigm where people will stream for like 4 to 6 hours, and I'm just like, I got other things to do, you know. But, you know, we'll see how it goes. All right, so yeah, Open Proxy. It's the third in the Shadow Decade series. I did stream some of the second book, Network Protocol's revision process. And that was that went pretty well. You know, I published it, and it was nominated for the Chicago Reader's 2017 Best Chicago Fiction Novel. Didn't win, was a finalist, but you know, that was pretty cool. I was nominated and was a finalist for Best Chicago Novelist myself. I didn't win, but, you know, hey, not only was I nominated, I made it all the way to the end. So that was cool too. Validation, right? Maybe it'll turn into some sales or something. I don't know. We'll see. All right, so Open Proxy is the third book. The series basically is a cyberpunk near future series set in 10 years in the future about a woman who doesn't remember the period of time between now and then. You know, she woke up in the hospital finding herself 10 years older, doesn't know where she's been. There's no record of what she's been doing. She has no job history. She has no bank account. She has no assets. So she's basically having to start over from scratch in a world where the safety net has degraded to a alarming degree. Even worse than it is now. And it's based on, you know, middle of the road sorts of projections as to what the future will be like. I wrote it, the first book in the series, when I planned it all out, in 2015, before the election. And things went a different way than anyone expected. You know, it's dystopian, not post-apocalyptic. So I've had to consider carefully, you know, whether to go back and make things a little more dire or not, you know. I'm still waiting to see how that plays out because things are so in flux right now. I don't want to, you know, come across as overly optimistic and naive about what our prospects are. But yeah, there's that. What else? The first book, she's basically trying to get her feet under her, trying to, you know, find work, trying to find a place in the world, trying to figure out what's happened. And, you know, needless to say that if you're watching this stream where I'm going to be basically planning the third book and you haven't read the first two, there's going to be pretty big spoilers. In fact, there's going to be big spoilers for the third book. So if you're planning to read it, maybe don't watch. You know, I mean, I hate to say don't watch the stream, but I'm literally discussing the intricate ins and outs of what's going to be happening in the book. You know, this is watching me write it. So yeah, spoilers. Anyway, the third book, the second book, has her, you know, a little bit better integrated into the world, but it ends on a very down note. A lot of the alliances and relationships she's built have fallen away. Some people have died. You know, and the whole thing with the series is that she has these skills that she's picked up at some point during the shadow decade she doesn't remember, you know. It's sort of a born identity, long kiss goodnight sort of thing, where, you know, she may have been some sort of operative for a shadowy organization, and we still don't know much about that. We really have teased at it in the first two books, but until this third one, we haven't really revealed what the deal is yet. And that's what we're going to be doing here, is delving into that, revealing that to the reader, because the third book may be the last book in the series, depending on sales. I've planned it in such a way that there is room for another book or two if it does well, you know. And, you know, I would love that. I would love to be able to keep writing for these characters in this setting. But the sad truth is that if it doesn't sell well enough, I have to move on. You know, I mean, that's the cold hard truth when you're a writer, is that you can't, as much as you like something, if the sales aren't there, you can't afford to invest too much time in it, you know. And that may sound cold and mercenary, but that's business, you know. This is a business. This is what I do for a living. I don't have another source of income, so I have to make those hard choices. Hopefully I won't have to, you know. I mean, I don't evaluate how well a series is selling until after the third is out, because people buying patterns towards finished or you know, semi-finished trilogies are very different from just if the first book is out or the second book is out or if it's standalone. So I really can't evaluate, and this is, writing business stuff right here, but you can't really evaluate the strength of a series until, in my opinion anyway, until the third book. So that's what we're going to be doing after this is done. But first we got to finish that. And we're coming to the end of the pre-writing period. And we'll start the actual writing, and that's going to go pretty fast. I don't see spending more than a month or two writing, because once all the pre-writing is done, man, I write, 1,000, 1,500 words per hour, and if I'm writing a 60,000 word draft, that's a month and a half, 2 months at the outset. And revision goes even faster than that. So really the pre-writing possibly takes up most of the time, and it's not even really, typing at all, very much. So between the second book and the third book, the protagonist, Erica, was in prison. And we're not going to touch on that too much. We're going to allude to it. But that is a potential fourth book in this series, is going back and revealing what happened to her while she was incarcerated. But this book opens with her getting out of prison. And it's going to be the first act is her trying to reintegrate into a society that she never really was able to fit into in the first place. She never really finished dealing with her culture shock or techno shock from having missed, a decade of reality with whatever she was doing. So on top of that, she's spent 2 years in prison in very unpleasant circumstances, which again will be revealed in the fourth book. But we have plenty of foreshadowing that we can do in this one for that. So we know the opening. She's getting released from prison. What I don't have yet is a firm handle on the ending. I know the general middle. It's going to tie up the question of what she was doing during that decade and some issues about her own identity and sense of reality, because she's been suffering from depersonalization and derealization for the entire first 2 books, right? Which are both symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And we don't know why, we don't know what happened to her, we don't know what it was that caused her to go into what is almost a fugue state. But we will find that out in this book. And I know as a writer, but I'm not going to reveal that before it's revealed, even in this stream, because that's, just this stream is just another form of storytelling for me. This is the story of how this particular book comes together, and those of you who are watching, well, that's what you get to see, is how I personally put together a book. I mean, that's the story of this stream, more or less. So yeah, that's what we got going on. And you're invited to watch it. I'll take this stream, edit it just a little bit for brevity's sake, and throw it up on YouTube. And if you're watching this on YouTube, check out the Twitch. See this in real time, unedited, with all of my various pauses and verbal tics and ruminations left in. So, yeah. All right. So, the 2 things we need to decide before we're done with pre-writing. Well, 3 things really. We need to decide on the ending. We need to flesh out our cast of characters, and I have some ideas for that. And we need to work out the scene-by-scene beat sheet based on those first 2 premises. Now, what we know of what's going to be happening in the novel is that Erica will be commissioned to investigate someone who has appeared on the scene in Chicago, where the book is set, in a circumstance very similar to her own. Because what happened with Erica was that she was just found unconscious in an abandoned building. Right? She woke up in the hospital. She didn't know where she'd been. Nobody knew where she'd been. So of course this is a big deal to, you know, the FBI and to her family and to various other people. You know, where has she been? What has she been up to? Why do we have no records in this increasingly tight surveillance state that we live in? How did she slip through the cracks? So the FBI is very interested in what's been happening to her. And the organization that she was working for is very invested in nobody finding out what has happened to her. So from their perspective, what they need to do, what they need to be sure of, is that she won't reveal what's happened, that her amnesia is genuine, right? So they've been keeping an eye on her through the first 2 books, and I haven't been very blatant about that, but if you've read them, there are hints to it, and there are, you know, foreshadowing for everything that happens. I tend to write very tightly like that, sprinkled in here and there through Cold Reboot and Network Protocol. But this is where it's all coming together. This is where, you know, we find out what happened to her and what is going to happen to her. So this person who's shown up in a situation that's remarkably similar to her, of course, the caretaker of this person who has been discovered, who went missing, again, 10 years ago, has sought Erica out as someone who has been in this situation and presumably is capable of helping to discover what happened, you know, or at least motivated to. Erica does possess a set of you know, secret agency skills that she can bring to bear, although that's not as necessarily as widely known, you know, because she's been fairly careful about staying under the radar until the events of the last book, which had her end up in prison. For a good cause, but, you know, still, hey, prison. So she's hired, along with some other characters, to investigate this. And it turns out, and this is, you know, big spoiler, that this is all sort of a setup by the organization that has been watching her and that trained her to try to see how much, if they can reactivate her memories of what happened before, whether or not they have to eliminate her. Or in other ways, to make sure that she is not a threat, whether she actually is or not. So the revelation here is that, you know, that the crux of the story is going to be Erica choosing who she is. You know, it's not a choice that everybody gets, but we discover through the course of this that Erica is not, strictly speaking, a real personality, right? She is a sort of fugue state that her true self has entered. It's sort of a psychological defense mechanism. She has reverted to who she was in 2015, 2016, 2017. 2015, basically, was when she went missing. Before life got so complicated and terrible for who she is in 2025, 26. And that's a manifestation or an aspect of her post-traumatic stress disorder. She has become someone that is unacceptable to her. So she is doing her best to regress to that. You know, that's her psychological trick. The amnesia is real. The other persona she has, the Kate persona, which has manifested in the first 2 books as the voice of experience and reason to sort of let her tap into those skills she doesn't remember, that is more of her true self. Yeah? Kate is the real Erica. And Erica is a persona, a defense mechanism that she regresses into. And although they don't have a strict memory, even as Kate, doesn't remember what's been happening. You know, it's not like she's holding it out on herself or anything like that. She generally doesn't remember. It's more of a set of attitudes and personality and just, you know, nature rather than a set of experiences. The difference between the two personality fragments. And the crux of this, the climax of the book, is going to be basically the character having to decide, do I want to stay in this safe space of, you know, the Erica persona, where everything was simple and I was just an ordinary marketing executive and I didn't have to worry about doing terrible things to people? Or do I want to accept the truth of who I am and what I've been doing and reintegrate into the Kate persona? So that is the choice at the climax. And at the moment, I'm leaning to her choosing the path of truth, you know, something she has been resisting throughout the entire first two books. The idea, and it may turn out completely different, is that her experiences in these three books has changed who she is, where safe deception is no longer a acceptable choice for her to make. She will choose to let herself die, in effect, to return to being who she has truly become, with all of the guilt and regret that implies. It's the harder psychological choice, but it's the more honest one. And at the moment, that's where I'm leaning as far as where this is going. Now, the physical manifestation of how that happens, the actual, you know, nature of the ending, isn't something I have nailed down yet. And that's something, you know, I have the beginning open, you know, and I have the hook, and I have the inciting incident, but I don't know exactly how it takes shape, the final scenes of the last part of the book, which may be, you know, the last part of the entire series. It has to be something that's really, really powerful, and I have to orchestrate it well, so I'm being a little bit careful in deciding what exactly I want it to be. You know, it's got to fit in with the tone of the rest of the book while wrapping everything up and leaving open the possibility for another book if there's enough demand. You know, it has to be, you know, everything's wrapped up, but with a little bit of the door open a crack, so that if we do want to write more books in this series, which I wouldn't mind, it doesn't come across as, you know, a cash grab where the story's over and we're writing another chapter and we're writing another chapter and we're writing another chapter. I want to give space for organic growth beyond the point of this story arc. So there are future stories possible, always. I mean, that's the thing. There is no happily ever after, really. There's always the potential for that next story to happen. And all you have to do is throw the character's status quo into disarray. And that's like the easiest thing in the world to do. You know, something goes wrong. You know, something unexpected happens. And then you have another whole plot to walk through. But I want to get Erica to a point, in terms of her character arc, where she is firm, you know, where she's on firm ground, where she knows who she is, and the readers know who she is, where she becomes, you know, the end of her positive character arc leads her to being the iconic character. And I want there to be, you know, sufficient sacrifice involved in giving up the Erica persona, because that has to be a significant change, or it's not much of a sacrifice, you know. And that's one of the big themes that I like in fiction, is this notion of, you know, that there are no free lunches, that you have to suffer to get to where your path leads you. Because, you know, life is full of suffering, and we want to feel, there's this human need to feel that the suffering that we live is worthwhile, you know. So I want people to be able to see this and say, oh, well, you know, that makes sense. That's a complete story. So, that's, you know, where we're at. We need to figure out the ending in better detail. We need to orchestrate the protagonist's characters, and we need to work out the beat sheet. So let's, we have about a minute and a half, and then we'll take a 5-minute break, because I got to get water. I poured myself some water, but I didn't bring it over here. My throat's feeling scratchy, so we'll take a, let's take a 5-minute break at the end of our Pomodoro period here. So I will create an OBS scene for that. There we go. You can't see me, but I'm still here. Create some image, background, make it the right size. There we go, and I'll add some text to that. One second. There we go. That's pretty wretched. I'll have to touch that up. I'll add the there we go. That looks good, doesn't it? Well, not really. Let's fix that. There we go. All right. I'll be back in 4. All right, we are back. Okay, so yeah, that's basically where we're at. I've got some ideas as far as where things can go. But let's deal with the character orchestration first, because I have some ideas in that direction. All right, so character orchestration. And I'll be doing a video on this. I'm doing a YouTube series on preparing for and then winning NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. So if you want to check that out, I'm posting a new video every Wednesday leading up to November. So if you want to check that out, check out my YouTube and see how that goes. But yeah, character orchestration is basically making sure that your cast sort of works well, as a unit. And what that means is basically, first of all, making sure that there's sufficient conflict involved. Like everyone's character traits, they all bounce off of each other in interesting ways, and that sort of generates new layers of story. And it makes your job easier because it's not everything happens doesn't have to be directly related to the plot. You can have these character conflicts that make things more interesting, and they're basically, generated by these personality clashes. So you want to make sure that even among your protagonist and the protagonist allies, they have enough differences of opinion where even though they're on the same side, they argue, they fight, they have different ideas about what to do. And it's a lot easier than it sounds, people who are on the same side. And you can even have the antagonist be on the same side as your protagonist. They just have different ideas about what needs to be done to such a degree that, they fight. But even allies fight, and that makes the story more interesting because the way they handle those conflicts reveals a lot about the character. That way you can show if a character is bossy or a pushover or will do anything necessary to end conflict just by the way that they interact with the other people in their group. The second benefit to orchestration is it allows you to expand your audience identification. And what that means basically boils down to the fact that people like to read about people who are like them, or watch shows about people that are like them, or play games that are about people that are like them. The more points of connection an individual reader or listener or player has to the characters in your cast, the more connected they feel to what you've done. So the more diversity in your cast, and there's that word, diversity, the more diverse your cast is, the more the broader your potential audience is. Male characters, female characters, characters of different ethnicity and political ideologies and sexual orientations, whatever. Don't stuff people in there just to stuff people in there. There's no quota system, but every additional character is an opportunity to make your story's world a broader place. And that increases the connection that people who may not always see themselves represented well, those audience members will appreciate it, and they will let you know, and they will let other people know. So, it's good writing, it's good art, and it's good business sense, really. And you can't ask for much more than that. And it's such a simple thing, research, to look into it, to write sensitively. Have characters that reflect the diversity and variety of the real world, and a lot of people get upset about this. Oh, I don't have to be diverse. Oh, I don't have to, bow to political correctness. And, no, you don't. You don't owe anyone anything. You don't even owe your readers anything if you're writing for yourself. But if you're writing for yourself, then you are not trying to do this as a career, as a vocation, and you're not serious about your writing. When you are creating art, you are creating it to be consumed, and the art part of it is created in that consumption. It's the observer that makes it art, not you, the person who's writing it. And, but you are your own observer. You're one of the readers, so yeah, you do what you do. All right, so let's get on to character orchestration for this particular book. We have Erica, obviously. She is our baseline character. And we are going to have a group of other people who have been gathered for the same task. And they may or may not be aware of the real purpose behind this gathering, but I think it's more interesting if they are genuinely approaching it as a thing they're doing and not just, another way to screw our protagonist over. I've written some ideas down. Let me get my notebook. All right, so we have a few ideas written down. Erica Crawford is our protagonist, and when I create characters, this is generally the means that I use to do it. If you've watched these videos before, if you watched my stream before, you know what I do. But basically, characters are built from 3 core elements, and Erica this is her 3rd book, so we know her pretty well. Except we don't know what happened to her in prison and how that has changed her, so that is where we're discovering her in this book, is how she's grown and changed during the time that we were not watching her. So, Erica, her goal is to try and discover who she really is and what's happened to her. The first character aspect we deal with is her physiology. This is the face that she wears to the world. It's a little bit of attitude, but it's mostly, how you move, how you look, what other people see when they look at you. It's the surface level of who you are. Erica is a 38-year-old woman in excellent physical condition. She has short black hair, brown eyes, and an athletic build. She is astoundingly fit, but her skin bears a number of unexplained old scars. She's tough with inexplicably sharp reflexes. And this doesn't have to be written very well. I'm using inexplicably and inexplicably too often because nobody sees this but you while you're writing, and obviously you watching the stream. Strong physical memories, not having much to do in prison but workout has slowed her physical deterioration. Because she's in such physical shape at the opening of the first book that she doesn't really know how to maintain that with the nutrition levels available to her given her financial situation. She doesn't have the time or really the knowledge to work out like she had been, and she doesn't have the same nutritional intake. So when you're at that peak of physical perfection, you can go downhill pretty fast, at least in the beginning. So she hadn't been taking as good care of herself, but in prison, that was sort of taken care of for her. She didn't have a lot to do but work out anyway, so she has slowed, not completely stopped, the deterioration of her peak conditioning. Second element is the character's sociology, which is basically how they fit into your setting. For Erica, she's fresh out of prison with a felony on her record. Her only friends, Te Arawa, have abandoned her for a darker route. They were a Maori street gang of climate refugees introduced in the first and second books. And the way the second book ended, they've gone their separate ways, and she's been in prison anyway. She does have some connections that she made in prison that may be useful. The FBI is watching her, so is the agency. The agency is the general term that I'm using for whoever it was she was working for that she does not remember. And that's the physiology, who she appears to be, and the sociology, how she fits in, combine to create psychology. This is, how she believes other people see her, and that determines who it is that you are. Erica has been hardened by her experiences in prison, but has come to accept her badass nature, to a degree. She's still Erica, though, because she hasn't fully accepted the reality of who she was. Erica is a retreat to an earlier self caused by an inability to cope, and possibly botched memory drugs. This was a cool bit of research I did, and I'll talk about them later in the stream, maybe. Still, she's a bit ruthless, not like Kate was, her other self. It's just that her faith in the system, in fate, and in goodness has been shattered. And then I write like a short, in-character little journal here, and that helps me get a feel for the voice of the character. And you can see here I've made a note in the next book covering what happened in prison, Fatal System Error, which is a pretty good title, and it goes along with the general theme. And it'll be about, if I do write it, about for-profit prisons and the way that they are effectively in the near future the equivalent of slave labor, effectively. So we'll deal with that if I get around to writing that book, but that's just a note to myself, and I sprinkle notes around here, and I've got other characters that we have developed. Dr. Brogan. As you can see, I have two notes for Dr. Brogan. He's a psychiatrist, and he dies, in all caps. Dr. Brogan is her therapist, and that's all we need to know about him at the moment. We can fill that out as we go along. Tony Seville, who I name something else. I think I name him something else later. But Tony Seville is the antagonist. He is the architect of what's going on. And we don't really need to worry about him too much because he doesn't appear much in the beginning. He presents himself to the team that we're building, to Erica, as their sponsor. He's the one who's hiring them to look into the amnesiac that's been discovered, the person who's in the same situation that Erica was in. So we don't need to know as much about his truth self yet because he's not part of our protagonist grouping. So his orchestration doesn't matter as much. But just to compare with Erica, he's like, old money rich. Practically the definition of privilege. And he comes across as inoffensive and friendly, but that's mostly a cover-up because he is a high-functioning sociopath, fanatically devoted to the agency that he serves. All right, so we have our operatives, which is Erica and the other people that are hired, and their goal is to investigate the mysterious amnesiac that has been discovered. I've got the first one, who I've changed the name. His original name was a placeholder, and it was David Paul. And I think I've changed that. Yeah, I did. David, give him a more interesting name. Stanislav. I decided that he was Ukrainian. I don't remember why. I think it comes up at some point. But he's basically an old detective, a world-weary detective in his late 40s. While not in the worst shape, he comes across as tired and a little run down. His dress and bearing show a certain lack of concern for his appearance. Stains, stitches, tears, wear, etc. He's a very sort of Columbo sort of character. If this were a movie, I would want him played by Tommy Lee Jones. Sort of as in The Fugitive. He's a little more tired, a little more run down. So sort of like Tommy Lee Jones as Columbo is the character that I see here. Doesn't always eat, drink, or work out as he should. He always looks a little tired, a little sad. His clothes are practical and inexpensive, as are his tastes and vices. He is smarter than he looks, with a keenly analytical mind. He's a licensed private detective in California with a positive but fading reputation among corporate clients. While he's had a little trouble with the police for straying into legal gray areas and otherwise interfering, he has avoided a record of any sort. He's often underestimated, but this is by choice. He has a keen understanding of human nature and can quickly assess the best approach when dealing with others. People open up to him. He has a fatalistic streak that in the past came off as a sense of practicality. Of late, though, he's become more introspective, wondering at the good he's done in life for his corporate clients at the expense of consumers and the public. These moments of introspection are coming more and more frequently, though he hasn't let them get in the way of his job. Bills still have to be paid after all. And I've written a little in-character journal here. And again, this is something that nobody but me will ever really see. So we've got our operative list. Let's just do some shorthand here because we have to invent the other characters. Haven't gotten around to it. This is the meat of what we're doing tonight, is deciding on the protagonist group. So we have David, Stanislav, he's a detective from California. He is sort of the voice of experience for our protagonist group. He is a let's say, just call him leader for now. We can figure out the exact permutations of what that means later. He considers himself a realist in the sense that he is... he tries to stay objective about things. He tries to take a balanced attitude towards what's going on. And he's sort of the most experienced of the people that we'll be adding. He's very, very tired, very kind of run down. But he will be an interesting character to present. He'll be sort of like a mentor figure to Erica, at least, and possibly some of the other team members. Our next character is going to be, what I call him, Louis Schneck, or just Schneck, as he'll be called in the book. He is a electronics intrusion expert, or hacker, if you will. We'll just call him Hacker. And in a way that these operatives are going to be sort of classic cyberpunk tropes, because that's what we're doing here. But I see Schneck as being he is probably a little older than Stanislav, but he's not. He doesn't come across as nearly as experienced. He's sort of a weirdo. He's a bit of an odd fellow, sort of like your conspiracy theorist, basement hacker who never grew up. Take someone in their 30s, being the computer hotshot in 2017, and extrapolate that 10 years. Where do they go in life? Maybe he used to be sort of a big deal on the internet, but nobody cares. Maybe he's even more of like a script kiddie, but I see him as being fairly competent. And I see him as being also very apathetic about life. He's not very invested. He's given up, even to a degree that Stanislav hasn't. He's in many ways, he's the foil character. He's what we can become if we're not careful. He has nothing, effectively. I mean, like, he's involved in this gig both for the money and for the challenge of it. But he's sort of a low-grade sociopath in certain ways, despite the fact that he's like really, really smart and in sort of a trickster Bugs Bunny sort of way. But he's also very, I guess, uninvested is the best way to put it, in the fate of his companions. He's there to do the job and feels a general sense of superiority towards the others, in an unearned sense of superiority, in a very sort of Dunning-Kruger sort of way. I mean, he's good at his job, but he's not really good at much else, and he sort of has the attitude that anything he's not good at is unimportant. And I'm sure we all know people like that. Our third character is Alan Gorsky. He's a little bit sort of, if you saw him on the street, you'd assume he was like a trucker, a laborer of some sort, maybe a cab driver. And he is a driver. He is in fact our driver, but it's also our gadget guy. He's the guy who builds things on order for the rest of the team. He's an electrical engineer, and he is, going to be very, very cynical, very snarky, sort of rude, very, very grumpy. He's a big dude, but he is rude in a way that's different from Schneck, where Schneck is legitimately trying to get at people sometimes. Gorsky just does not care. Or he does care, but he doesn't show it because he's just very, very pessimistic. And I was tempted to make him very, very Slavic Russian, but I didn't. He's very, very American. He's just very grumpy all the time. In like an 80s movie, though, he would be like the Russian engineer along with the team who's all, gruff and doesn't, care in a very Cold War kind of way, but no, he's American. In fact, I may change the name from Gorsky. I just chose it because it's Polish and Chicago is a super Polish city. But he's very much a Chicagoan. He's a very, Chicago kind of guy. Our fourth character is going to be Boston Slim. And actually, name may change. Boston Slim, or if you are privileged enough to know her real name, Lucy Fan, is a Vietnamese woman in her 30s, and she is sort of the person you go to when you need something, either a good or a service. Boston Slim can get it for you. And she refers to herself in the third person as Boston Slim, or whatever we decide to name her. I like the name Boston Slim. It just sort of came to me. She is not a literal pimp, but she has sort of that almost retro attitude when it comes to portraying herself as, you know, just smooth and luxuriant and just sort of, you know, she carries the attitude a bit, and almost to the point of parody, but it is sort of a show. And a lot of the characters do have these defenses up, and I think that's a good theme for our protagonist group, is that everyone is fronting an attitude that they don't necessarily live up to. You know, it's as a defense. Boston Slim is Boston Slim. Gorski is gruff and uninterested, but he's not. He actually does care. He doesn't want to watch more people die. You know, Schneck is genuinely uninterested, but he makes these bizarre attempts to, you know, socialize with people that never go right. And Erica is Kate, and Kate is Erica. She's our fifth character. Boston Slim, though, is going to be much more of an optimist than the other characters. I see her as being very loyal. She and David have a history of some sort, or at least they've worked together in the past enough that they trust each other to a degree. And while Boston Slim does try to come off as very, very not world weary, but very, very worldly, she has maintained that sense of optimism in sort of an idealistic way. So, and this will set her off well against David, I think. And the characters are all, they have these conflicting value systems and attitudes that I think will really, you know, turn into something very, very interesting. Particularly when we contrast them with our protagonist, Erica, who is basically lost and confused. While all of the protagonists do have these facades that they maintain, they at least know who they are, whereas Erica is just damaged, I guess, is the way that I would put it. Alright, so that's where we're at with that. Originally I was going to have this stream go on until 10 tonight, but I think I've pulled something in my back. We had a air conditioner delivered this morning because our old one was not working, and it's a big, heavy, 60-pound unit, and we're up here on the 3rd floor, and I was like, oh, I can just bring this up myself. And while I could physically do so, it was not necessarily the right choice to make, and I'm starting to feel that tightness. So I'm gonna have a soak in the tub with some Epsom salts and try to forestall being useless tomorrow, because it appears that I've forgotten that I am almost 40 years old. And that's something you should keep in mind maybe when you're doing physical things, when you're a 40-year-old writer who's a bit out of shape. So thank you for watching the stream. I'll be streaming tomorrow morning, assuming I can get out of bed. I think it's 10 a.m. to noon. I don't know. Check the schedule down below, and we'll talk more about what we're doing next with this book. We'll nail down that ending. So, take it easy.